Bismillah, peace be with you everyone. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over some ideas that I've been having surrounding consciousness, free will, and a little bit of alchemy. The alchemy was not intended at the outset, but it was something that seemed to show up in hindsight. So I just wanted to begin here. We have the alchemical reference Chrysopoeia, which means gold making. Here we have a mathematical heuristic as to how I came upon the gold making pattern. So we began with the geometric series sum, which is 1 over 1 minus x. It's the sum of an infinite series, and then you multiply it by e to the I pi, which is Euler's identity. And these two were sort of the mental image I had in my head when circling this idea about the infinite geometric series sum being the lead and the Euler's identity being the philosopher's stone. And you bring them two together, you get their product, which is negative 1 over 1 minus x, which translates to 1 over x minus 1 when you do the sign flip, the denominator swaps. So then what you do here is you set equal to x. So really this is the equation that matters, is x equals 1 over x minus 1. And you don't really need any of the geometric series or Euler's identity to get to this fixed point equation, but the mental image was, I think, important to show how I arrived at the idea. And then what's interesting is you set 1 over x minus 1 equal to x, multiply both sides by the denominator, and then you get x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0, and this is the golden ratio equation. So we have x, our fixed points are equal to the golden ratio and the golden conjugate, which is negative 1 over the golden ratio. So the Chrysopoeia mathematics here is somewhat elucidating like a fixed point of the golden ratio. And I kind of was circling this idea in terms of like truth as beauty, and how like approaching truth head on, you kind of get the flight of Icarus, where you go too close to the sun and you get your wings melted off. Or in this particular instance, I was kind of conceiving as 1, which here in this equation would be considered a pole, which if you approach it, it shoots you away. It's kind of like a planetary orbit, and you're like a meteorite and you get caught in the orbit and then it ricochets you out. So there had to be a way to kind of approach truth, kind of like in an archer's paradox sort of way, which means like if you're aiming at a target with a bow and arrow, you have to aim slightly off because of the curvature of the arrow around the bow. So having this idea of seeking out beauty in a mathematical sense led me to kind of circling this idea of having a fixed point at the golden ratio. Over here down at the bottom, you can see that this actually generalizes to all of the metallic means. So if you replace the pole of 1 with 2, you end up getting the silver ratio as your conjugate pair, bronze ratio for 3, and so on. Rational outputs, motes here is a reference to this, so we'll just go ahead and jump right into this Prima materia. So let me actually change the variable ZW here into, let's see if this works. It does not work. I'm gonna grab a pen. Alright, so let's go x minus n instead of the z minus w. Okay, so the Prima materia, this is something that kind of, again, the alchemical names came after the fact, but I realized after generalizing this to all the metallic means, I saw another generalization where taking the original heuristic idea with the Euler's identity, combining it with the geometric series, I removed the pi from the Euler's identity with a theta symbol, so that way this numerator can spin across the entire complex plane instead of being fixed at a single number. And then we have the pole and the position. So the Prima materia I'm denoting a mote, like a spinning mote of dust in the air when you kick up something in an attic, and you can kind of see those mote beams spinning in beams of light. So a mote, this is the prima materia, and we'll get back a little bit to free will and approaching the sun directly and Archer's paradox in a bit, but I just wanted to say what a mote was, because the rational motes, where the fixed points are not irrational in metallic means, but if you use 0, the fixed points are 0 as the pole, as your x value. This is going to be fixed points of 1 and -1, and then the next case where they are rational outputs is 3/2, which is the perfect fifths in music. These are the really first two simple versions where you're going to get the discriminant is a perfect square, so you get rational -1/2 and +2 for the fixed points of the 3/2, which is also interesting when you kind of start to think about gravitinos and gravitons and fermions, -1/2 being like a fermionic spin, 2 being a graviton spin, 3/2 being a gravitino spin. Not saying that I've made any connections there, but those numbers are enticing to think about in a dynamic systems. And then they also have trace n, so the sum of their two fixed points are always going to be equal to the pole value, and then the via Vieta's formula, the norm for the two fixed points is always going to be -1. Or e to the I pi, you could say, is always going to be Euler's identity for the norm for all of these fixed point equations. And then they all drum up their own quadratic fields as well. So with the golden ratio, you get the quadratic field √5. With the silver ratio, you get the quadratic fields √8 or √2, if you simplify. Now, why I call this the prima materia? So the next part here, this is you can use these spinning kernels via something called Mittag-Leffler theorem to basically Lego brick wave functions together. So you think sine wave, cosine wave, tangent wave. You can use these spinning kernel motes to individually build points out of a wave function. Or not like a quantum wave function, but like a wave on a graph, like a sine, cosine. Which the two are somewhat related, but I don't want to over-claim physics right now. So you can use this spinning kernel to construct wave functions like sine, tangent, cosine. And in that way, you can sort of start relating to physics and wave formation via a discrete value instead of the continuous wave, which is pretty important, I guess, and why I decided to have the naming convention, prima materia. And then I've got like a few other things with the mathematical side of the framework, but this will probably be the last math-heavy video that I do for a little while, and then I'm going to shift gears into the more philosophical, moral facets of the framework. If you didn't see the introductory video, go check out my first video where we're kind of developing a modern metaphysics. And so getting back to free will, so the reason that this came about was actually, like I said, using the Archer's paradox to approach truth through beauty in an indirect way. And then you can also kind of see how, like the golden ratio, I was anchoring to that value system because of the way that it's continued fraction representation. It's 1 + 1 divided by 1 + 1 divided by 1 + 1 divided by 1 + 1. So it's got a continued fraction of all ones. And so like in that way, you're kind of approaching the one without approaching it directly because you've hit a point where like its representation is going on continually. And so this relates to free will in the sense that, okay, so this top value, the theta value, this can kind of be considered, say your entire will is written in a ledger that is composed of these motes. And so each decision or each point at which your attention is directed over the course of your life is going to build a meromorphic function out of these motes. And the theta value here is this is going to be how you put a spin on things. This is how you narrate the events that are occurring to you. So this isn't free will in the sense that you're actualizing things in the world. It's just how you interpret what has happened to you. You can see a glass half full or half empty, and this theta symbol is going to be the freedom that you have to navigate informational space by putting a spin on things. And then the x value is just going to be like the output, like the fixed points that you arrive at, that you encounter. I'm not sure like what those would be, if they would be like qualia states or something like that. I don't have like an actual one-to-one mapping yet. But then the n value, the pole of the mote, is going to be whatever your highest value system is at the time of that decision. Whatever concept or thing in and of itself, like in a noumena sense, like whatever object it is you are circling around. So like n1, you might be able to like metaphorically say is like putting God first. So if your n value is 1, it means that you're circling around trying to appease God or like do well within your religious creed. But obviously, like, most people are not going to be putting God first, and so like this value is probably going to be more tied to things like thirst, lust, satiation, rest, sleep, monetary seeking, like survival needs are going to be what occupies this n space. And it's probably would be like a complex number instead of a clean integer, if that's allowed within the space. I don't know if like physics would impose integers to occur in something like this within the study of consciousness or not, but like the general makeup of this spinning kernel, I more or less arrived upon by trying to study consciousness and free will. And so this is kind of like a compatibilist take on free will. It's not saying that you have free will to co-create reality. You're more like a co-navigator of reality via these degrees of freedom. A metaphor that you can kind of use to articulate this is sort of like something called a create your own adventure game book, where you buy this book and it's pretty thick, and your experience of reading the book is dictated by events within the pages that are like, once you reach the end of page 13, you have a choice to either enter the cave or turn around. If you choose to enter the cave, turn to page 54. If you decide to turn around, go back to page 6. And so you have these choice injunctions. But the book itself is already pre-written. So the determinism is that you have this story that is already there, and the free will that you have is how to navigate that story and your experience of it, because the entirety of the book isn't meant to be read as like a novel piece. It's supposed to be navigated through, and different experiences are going to have different different navigating choices are going to produce different experiences, whether you're putting a glass half full or glass half empty spin on things, and what the most important thing is to you at that moment of making that decision. This was just sort of a couple of interesting, cool little mathematical insights with the dynamic derivation of the golden ratio and the generalization to metallic means, and then especially the rational mote, 0 and 3, 2. I think this is all some pretty interesting and simple mathematics. And the spinning mote, I think, with the Mittag-Leffler theorem, I think is also pretty interesting for math and simple enough to understand. I don't know if this stuff's already like on the books. This is all just things that I was kind of musing on, given the, how do I want to say, interest in free will and determinism, and just kind of viewing the world as a mathematical simulation in some sense, and how to navigate it in a metaphysical way. And so if you haven't checked out my first video that kind of contextualizes all of this within a metaphysics, then go check that one out. And like I said, I think my next video is going to be shifting gears away from the math and moving more toward the moral frameworking. And I think the next one will be a case study on Satan and the ways in which his behaviors are what you want to try to avoid, and setting him up as a well-defined character by which to get away from. And then one more parting piece before I do that video that kind of connects to all of this is like in this mathematical landscape metaphysics that I'm sort of trying to articulate, I would associate Satan with the numerical constant, the square root of 2. There's a handful of reasons. One, because like Diablo, it kind of means to like cast a cross, and it's connected to the number 2, and it's like the accuser. It's like the original etymology of 2, or root 2, and like how root 2 kind of disrupted Greek mathematics because it wasn't a clean fraction, and just it's like a symmetry breaker. As you see, the square root of 2 show up a lot of times in symmetry break equations and like bifurcation theory. And so like metaphorically, like the agency of Satan often shows up as the square root of 2 in my estimations in this kind of mathematical landscape of metaphysics that I'm trying to explore. So let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below, what your thoughts are, and if there's any other ideas you would like me to explore in the future. And as always, I really appreciate you sticking with me to the end of the video. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.